Cek, tes 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome to the second
Second International
International Conference
Conference
on
on Game,
Game
Game
Art
Art,
and
and
Gamification
Gamification 2018.
2018.
My name is Indra.
And my name is Kimberly. We are here to accompany you during this event.
Yes, warm welcome to General Chair Binus Joint International Conference, Professor Tirta Nugraha Mursitama, the Vice Rector for Research and Technology Transfer for Bina Nusantara University, and IEEE Computer Science Chapter Dr. Surya Diputra Liawatimena, and then of course the Dean of the Faculty Computing and Media, Dr. Raymondus Kosala, and then Bina Nusantara Senayan Campus Director Winche as Commander.
That's right. I'm excited each and every one of you is here today because we are going to have a blast. You're excited?
Yes, we are
Yeah,
excited, I believe.
sure. I know you've been working hard to bring games for greater good, and I can't wait to see how your awesome ideas, and work compete in this year's academic discussion as well.
As many you know, Game Lab Bina Nusantara is repeating its success from the first conference to provide a friend and informal atmosphere in which ongoing research in game development in many aspects can be presented and discussed.
And we know most of people seeing or thinking game is only for entertainment, but through the right application, game can be used to support productivity in many sectors such as education, health, and also training. And this year's International Conference of Game Art, and Gamification honorably invited Professor Dr. Daniel Fung Xuanzheng, Vice Chairman Medical Board Institute of Mental Health Singapore.
Great. Moreover, we're also grateful to have a Dr. Alfred Budiman, as CEO Samsung R&D Indonesia. Welcome. Both of our distinguished guests have incorporated game and done research to apply a game in their respective professional work.
So what are we waiting for? Without further delay, we would like to invite the General Chair of Binus Joint International Conference to give his speech. So please welcome Professor Tirta Nugraha Mursitama.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this wonderful venue for conference. Uh, I have to welcome Professor Daniel Pum from the Singapore, Vice Chairman Medical Board at the Institute of Mental Health Singapore, and also Associate Adjunct Professor with Duke and US Graduate Medical School and US Singapore, and our colleague as well, Dr. Alfred Budiman, the CEO of Samsung Research and Development, and adjunct professor at University of Chicago Graduate School of Business Asia Campus. Bapak Dr. Raymond Kosala, Dean, and also Bapak Yaya Heriadi, Dr. Yaya Heriadi, as a chairperson of this conference. All these distinguished guests, invited speakers, all the presenters, and dear participants. First of all, let us praise to God, the Almighty, for His merciful and blessing, as we are here to witness historical moment, a very first initiative of Binus University to host the first Binus Joint International Conference. I would like to admit that this conference is part of the Binus Joint International Conference. Under the Binus Joint International Conference, we have 8 conferences. And I'm very happy and very proud to announce that this ICGGAG is the last, but also one of the, I think, well organized best conference we have in a downtown, the center city, just near to the CBD, and well equipped with the fastest or latest technology. And I think this is the one and the only live streaming conference compared to the other 7 conferences. So I would like you to give a big applause to all of you and participants and also the committee. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share that under the Binus Joint International Conference, we have successfully collected more than 800 papers from the 8 conferences. And we are very proud that later on, the chairperson will inform us the number of papers that will be presented in today's conference. And I'm very happy as well to announce that all the invited keynote speakers, more than 10 countries, for example, from Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, Canada, People Republic of China, from Taiwan, Japan, France, Germany, and United States of America. And not only the professors, but also the leading executive or leaders from the business, like Dr. Alfred Woodiman here. We have another people from the industry that also have delivered their thoughts, their knowledge and skill in the other conferences. This joint international conference is part of the effort of the Binus University, firstly to enhance the number of the publication of the faculty members, but also we would like to uh, incorporate, or we have to work together among the industry and also university to collaborate not only for research but also with any product and process of innovation, and hopefully we can also produce the patent in NDA. Therefore, as a Vice Rector of Research and Technology Transfer, I would like to wish you a wonderful conference and today, and also we hope that not only present your current research on during your presentation, but also I would like to encourage you to have a very close acquaintances with keynote speakers, with all presenters from all over the world. And last but not least, I would like to thank the general chair with all the committee for the all the hardworking, laborious, and up and downs, everything. And I'm very happy to say that this is one of the successful conference. Wish you a great day and wish you a wonderful conference today. Thank you very much and very good morning. Oh, and by this, I would like to officially open the ICGGAC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the speech, Bapak Profesor Tirta Nugraha Mursitama. So next,
Right. So next, we kindly invite IEEE Computer Science chapter. Please welcome Dr. Suryadi Putra Diawati. Oh, he doesn't come. So right. So I think we are next to our agenda.
finally, I'd like to invite the chairman of this international conference on game art, and gamification 2018. Please welcome Dr. Yaya Heriadi.
Good morning, everyone. His Excellency Prof. Tirta Nugraha Mursitama, Vice Rector, Research and Technology Transfer, Dr. Raimundus Kosala, Dean of the Faculty of Computing and Media, distinguished keynote speakers, Professor Daniel Fung Sheng from Vice Chairman Medical Board of the Institute of Mental Health Singapore, Dr. Alfred Budiman, CEO of Samsung Research Development. Thank you for coming. All committee members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of organizing committee, I'd like to extend my warmest welcome to all keynote speakers, contributor, participant of this conference. It is a great pleasure to have you all here. The second international conference on game art, and gamifications aims at bringing us together to share knowledge and best practices of the latest updates, exchange breakthrough ideas, research results, as well as build professional relationship among academics, expert researchers, designer, and publisher in the wide area of games. This conference covers a broad range of research topics in the field of game art, and gamification. Today, nearly 50 academia, researchers, practitioners, and presenters from 4 countries have gathered here. And 56 papers have been submitted in this year conference. Each paper was reviewed with tight criteria from our invited and voluntary multinational reviewers. Based on the review results, 35 papers have been accepted, which has led to an acceptance rate of 62.5%. All accepted papers that met the requirement will be orally presented in 5 technical sessions and will be published in the conference proceeding. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the keynote speakers, Professor Daniel Fung, Dr. Alfred Budiman, who were willing to take up the ICGGAG invitation. My sincere gratitude to the Rector of Bina Nusantara, the Vice Rector of Research and Technology Transfer, Binus Senayan Campus Director, the Dean of the Faculty of Computing Media, and IEEE Indonesia sections. Finally, I express my gratitude to the program committees, paper reviewers, paper contributors for your endless support. We hope this conference will bring games for greater good to many communities. I hope you enjoy the conference. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Pak Yaya.
Thank you, Pak Yaya Heriadi, for the speech. Next, yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, we will to hear the words from our honorably keynote speaker. First, we'd like to invite Professor Dr. Daniel Fung Shansang. And actually, as we know that Dr. Daniel Fung, currently he is the chairman medical board of Singapore's Institute of Mental Health, and he is an adjunct associate professor at the Yong Lulin Medical School, Duke and US Medical School, National University of Singapore, and Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine, Nanyang Technological University. And he's currently the president of the International Association for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Allied Professions, an international NGO advocating for children's mental health. And Dr. Fung also has been working with children who have been abused since the start of his career and is active with the Singapore Children's Society, where he received their Platinum Service Award in 2017. Wow, that's great, yeah? Dr. Fung is a member of the school management board of Paya Lebar Methodist Girls' School, and he was the president of the Singapore Association for Mental Health, an NGO that supports mentally ill persons and their families in the community. And he also was awarded the National Day Public Service Administration Bronze Award in 2017. And finally, Dr. Fung is also the program director of REACH,
Wow.
Response, Early Interventions, and Assessment in Community Mental Health, and award-winning community-based mental health program in Singapore. So what are we waiting for? Please welcome
Great
Dr.
work.
Daniel Fung.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to try and start this. Thank you for your kind words of welcome, and thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure. I think I have a link with Indonesia that most people may not be aware of, because my father was born here many years ago. He's now 87 years old. He studied in Penang, in Malaysia, and then he worked in Singapore. So there is a connection between me and Indonesia, and I've always been happy to come. So I'm going to share with you a Singapore journey that I took with the concept of serious games, and I'll give you that journey through an example that we have had. All right, just a couple of disclosures. Sorry, the top cannot be seen. I've now received some money from you all to come, but generally I don't take pharmaceutical company support, so I don't have many conflicts of interest as a result. So this is just to remind us about Singapore, the tiny little red dot that is where we are in relation to Indonesia. We are a very large country. You have large populations. Some of the examples I show you in Singapore may not be relevant to a country like yourself, but there are principles that we can both learn from one another. And I'm always very keen to learn from around the world. As you know, I'm now the president of the International Association of Child Adolescent Psychiatry, Allied Professions. I'm interested in every country in the world and how we can share our global knowledge, and that's important. Just the background, Indonesia is fairly diverse, but so is Singapore. It's just the proportion of size, as you can see. In fact, Singapore is about 700 square kilometers. It is even smaller in high tide. So when it rains, and of course, there are differences here that is important. We live quite long here in Singapore. Your life expectancy, and this is based 2 years later, it may have improved somewhat. The good thing is that our literacy rates are relatively high, which means that there's an opportunity to really use that ability for people to learn and acquire knowledge on their own. And I think that's important. The other thing that's important is the amount of money that you spend on healthcare. You may think this is very good, only 2% of the GDP, but I'll explain to you that actually this is actually a false figure, because in Singapore we are rapidly aging. So remember, our life expectancy is very high, at 82 years, which means that if you're born today, you live for 82 years. Infant mortality is relatively low, much lower than Indonesia across the board. I think if you compare Singapore to Jakarta, it may be closer. This is overall Indonesia. So with this kind of figures, what does it mean? Our population is going to live for a long time. In fact, Singapore is now the most rapidly aging population in the world. All right, and in about 10 to 20 years, at least 3/4 of the population will be in the upper end of the age spectrum, and that is concern. So what will I cover today? I will talk a little bit about the digital world and its relationship to health. I will define serious games, and then I will give you an example that we've taken. Tomorrow, I will talk about some other things slightly different from today's talk. So let's talk about the digital world. This picture is just an action plan that we have for the young. I'm part of this committee. It's called Nurture SG. It is about developing the young, and we're very concerned about the digital world and its impact on our young. Now, many of you here, I would gather, looking at the audience, how many of you are below the age of 25? Oh, nobody. You look younger. There are a couple, right? If you are older, and many of us are, I am what I call a digital migrant. That means I have learned computers only when after I was born. For me, it was in my teens. So in the 80s, when Bill Gates and Steve Jobs was getting into the computer world, I was very interested. In fact, I almost signed up for computer science. I ended up in medical school, but I should have done computer science, right? That have been much more lucrative. But some of the young people today, they are born in a world where the digital world is it's part of their lives from the moment they are born. They're toddlers, they're already using computers. So the digital world for these digital natives are very different as compared to many of us. Now, I want to start off, actually, there's a title above this, but you can't see it because I think it's cut off. It's about what is health, all right? And I want to start this as a conversation with you. A lot of us think of health as between birth and death, which is fine. It is that. Of course, there is arguments. What about before you're born, right? There's a whole 9 months. What about after you die? Of course, we never know, but the more spiritual among us might think of that. Birth usually is associated with growth. It's a time of excitement. Nobody always thinks of birth as a bad thing. There are, of course, some children born with a lot of deficits, disability, but generally it is a time of growth. And when you pass a certain age, I think I just passed that a couple of years back, you start thinking of aging. And then you start thinking of death. And then during this time, it's not seen as a good thing. Aging is like a disease. When you're young, you talk of resilience. When you're growing, when you're old, you start thinking of problems. That's why I said in Singapore, we're rapidly aging, we're worried because we are thinking of problems. But this is where the East and the West is relevant. The Eastern concept is about community. It's about what do we all do for one another, our families, our parents. And the West, on the other hand, focuses a lot on individualism. The Asian concepts are collectivist, and a lot of times we tend to socialize things. So, when I work in a global association, there's always this drive. Oh, you need more professionals. You need to develop more expertise. Because if you're individualistic, you want people to help you in specific areas. When you're collectivistic, you think, okay, you have a problem, but this is not just your problem, it's a problem for the whole community. It is about integration and socialization. So in the East and in Asia, for example, we don't have many psychiatrists. Do we need more psychiatrists? Or do we actually have enough? Because we have communities that will support mental health problems. I'll get to that in a moment. The flip side of this is medicalization, where we use a medical model to approach things. We identify problems as diseases and illnesses that need treatment. And in order for these treatments to occur, you need doctors, physicians, healthcare professionals. And the concept of illness is really linked to this. It is not that there are no illnesses. There are clearly things that medications and medicalization is helpful. Actually, medicalization is a new concept in the 70s when Western medicine really developed with deep understanding of psychopathology, pathology, the causes of illness. But in the East, we have actually tried to integrate a lot of illnesses into society. If you have someone who's born who's a little slow, you manage them in your families, in your communities. Now, with socialization, we focus a lot in mental health, at least, on families, parenting. We think about trauma, we think about learning and schooling, and then we are worried about bad behavior and we think about how we can, improve that. If we can't, we put them in places where they can't cause harm. On the other side, medicalization has brought everything, and in America is the class example. Every behavior is a medical condition. If you take out the classification of medical disorders in America, you are taking out things like, in America, they already have hoarding. How many of you keep things in your house for a long time, things that you do not use? That's called hoarding. But in America, in the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, hoarding is a disorder. Now, some of it is, if you hoard a lot of things until you cannot walk in your house, and it's full of rubbish, and you are not a rubbish collector, presumably, then that is it may be indeed be a problem. But with the medicalization concept, we're always looking for causes. We think there's something wrong with the brain, there's functional impairments, and even the genes. In between is all the people who said psychiatry doesn't make any sense. There's an anti-psychiatry movement. You go to psychiatric conferences, there are people holding banners and saying, everybody is just a class example, of course, is Tom Cruise, right? Tom Cruise is against psychiatry. He says there's no such thing. Don't take medicine for your illnesses. And then, of course, Donald Trump and fake news, right? This is all bluff. Well, you have to understand that's concepts. It's important to realize that we don't have answers to everything in both sides of the coin. When I manage a child, I think of this broad issue. Is there a social issue? Is there a particular medical issue that we can address? I thought I'd start off with that so that you have some background to why we do certain things. Okay, the next is this concept of, my title slide is gone. It says health promotion and illness prevention. All right, what is health promotion and illness prevention? So the first step is to understand health promotion is not the same thing as prevention. A lot of people think that it is the same thing. It's not. Because health promotion is really about trying to improve the overall health of populations, people who are well. Prevention, and there are primary, secondary, and even tertiary, is really about dealing with illness. So in primary prevention, these are people who have a risk of an illness. They may be, for example, in depression. They may have had trauma when they were young. They have been abused. That will cause a risk. Some people are resilient. They don't move on to illness, but some will. So if you target this group and you help them, you improve the chances of, or reduce the chances of them getting into illness. Secondary prevention is more for early illness, to identify them quickly and get them treated. Suppose you have diabetes, or you're going to get diabetes. You start having what we call impaired glucose tolerance. Your blood levels of glucose is increased. Early illness. You can target that. Pick them up early, get them in a good diet so that you don't even have to take medications. Tertiary prevention, on the other hand, is more about treating advanced illness to reduce the long-term outcomes, so that you don't die early, you're not disabled, you don't have an arm, a leg cut off because of your illness, say diabetes, for example. So these are, now why I drew it as an inverted triangle is because when you start with health promotion, you incur the least amount of resources. When you start with tertiary illness, advanced illness, you need a lot of resources. Hospitals are very expensive to run. Our hospital, which is the largest in terms of physical size, is a mental hospital, operates on a $300 million budget. And that's the cheapest hospital in Singapore, because the rest run about $1 billion annually. It's very costly to deal with this. It's a lot cheaper to do with this. But very often, we spend the least amount of money in this area. Very little. And I think Dr. Titi will know this. It's a big issue. We need to think about that. What are the goals? If you start early, you prevent development of risk factors, enhance resiliency, reduce average population risk. You make the whole population better. If you go up to here, you're dealing with a smaller group of people. And this is a healthcare strategy that's important to think about. And in healthcare, we have been focusing a lot up here and even further. That means no more prevention, it's just treatment. It's very expensive. The time to see a doctor, no matter how junior the doctor, is expensive because the doctor's pay is very high. Okay, a little bit about the digital natives and the migrants. So Gen Z is it's the generation, the current generation after the millennials, all right? I'm supposed to be the X generation. We're X-Men, you know? And then some of you are baby boomers, right? I'm kind of in between the X and the baby boomer generation. The Generation Z, or the digital natives, people born in this era, all the young kids, they have exposure to screen time, whether it's a mobile device, a portable device, a handphone, iPad, and so forth. It changes their brains, all right? It does things to their brains. And you know, this, I don't know whether you're familiar, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all right? And it's very commonly used. Today, the Maslow hierarchy of needs is like this, okay? Basic Wi-Fi, you know, up here you need YouTube, right? And I believe this talk is on YouTube. A little side humor. Okay, so what is health and what is illness, all right? Illness and well-being are interesting concepts. A lot of us assume that if I'm unhappy, I must be depressed. That is not correct. Unhappiness is not the same as depression. Unhappiness is just unhappiness. You're not happy with what you have. Illness is very specific. Clinical depression is an illness. There are specific correlates. We also think that possibly the brain is involved in some way. But the concept of health, as defined by WHO, the World Health Organization, is really very inclusive. It's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Imagine that. What does that mean for you? It means that nobody is healthy. Who has this complete state? This is an ideal state. All right. Of course, this was made in 1948. When we assume you don't have illness, it means you're healthy. Possibly. Actually, if you don't have illness, it just means you don't have illness lah, because well-being is on a different dimension. You can have illness and still be happy. I'm sure you've met people like that. They tell you about their illness. They said, I've got this illness. I'm managing with it, and I live on. I have a family. I have things to do. Then there are people who have illness who are very unhappy because the government doesn't pay for their medical bills. They have no money. They say, my friends don't like me because I got an illness. There's a stigma. Then you languish. You, of course, can also languish with no illness, right? Unhappy people. In all our societies, that constitutes, depending on which country you're in Southeast Asia, could be 30 to 15 to 30% of the population. And of course, this is ideal. Huh? No one has illness and doing well. The reason why I want to talk about this is because well-being is really about thriving, and it's actually statistically independent, these two concepts. So bear that in mind, well-being and illness. Now, let's talk about internet and games. There is, I told you about the American classification. Gaming addiction is on the verge of DSM-5. It's not there. That means it's not actually classified as an illness. But WHO's ICD-11, which they just released in June, their beta version at least, says that there is a gaming disorder. So there is this problem here. It's an illness-focused issue, as opposed to, can we use games for the betterment and the goodness of society, which is the theme of this Congress. I think you need to understand the balance. Gaming addiction, not necessarily a bad thing, if the game actually improves your well-being. So I just thought of that for you to think about. So for example, we've actually looked at, in Singapore, this is a study about a few years back, where we said, do people play games? Yes. How many of them have problems? 34% may have occasional problems. They play until they have no time for their studies. And in Singapore, that's very important. But only about 2% have significant problems when they play games and they are unable to stop themselves. This is, of course, digital games. But games broader, I don't know. Can you be addicted to a card game, a board game? Maybe. No, it's also possible. Okay, back to the models of care. Well-being and illness. Two concepts. Healthcare tends to take the illness model, but in education, we actually have an interesting model. In education, the concept is always about universal. Nobody says, you only go to school when you cannot read. You go to school, and then you learn to read, right? So it's universal. If they can't, smaller groups. Still cannot one-to-one. The teacher will sit down with you and see, what's your problem? That's an educational model. It's called a response to intervention model. It is a model that's used in education because we understand education is universal. On the other hand, in healthcare, we've always talked about the universal healthcare model, which is, firstly, the healthcare model is go and see a doctor. You got a problem? Go and see a doctor. It's intensive, it's individual. In the old days, people could only see the doctor because they have money. If you're poor, too bad. You live with whatever you got. When we tried to make it universal healthcare, we said, okay, let's improve access, let's make it more effective. But we are pushing at the tip of the pyramid. It's in a one-to-one situation. It's a response to illness model, not tenable in populations. If you want to treat illness at this level, you need to have a lot of doctors. And that's what many countries try to do. You go to the West, they have 10 times more doctors than any of our countries in Asia. Is it more effective? The doctors are now killing themselves. I am not kidding. Too much stress, too many patients. Every patient that they see, there's 10 others waiting outside. They can't manage. So you need to think of this current model of treatment in clinics and hospitals as an old school of thought that needs to be changed. You need to think about a model that is more based on what I talked about, health promotion and prevention of illness model. And in order to do that, you need to develop the various sectors. You can't do it in hospitals and clinics. And in Singapore, we went through that lesson. Today, we are doing this now across. Now, we started with mental health. I mean, 10 years ago, I said, there's no way I'm going to have 1,000,000 psychiatrists for the population that we got. We got about 6 million people. There's no way. It will take me many, many years, and many young children will not get access to help. I said, let's relook at our system. And it's important to think of that if you want to do health promotion. So the treatment that's usually in clinics, where you have very few people, and all the people that see kids, and that's my setting with children, they tend to end up in clinics. Our waiting times was going from 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, even 6 months to get to see a psychiatrist. At that time, this is about 10 years ago, 2007, even in Hong Kong, they were seeing the child psychiatrist in 3 years. There just wasn't enough child psychiatrists. And in China, it's even lower, the numbers. In India, very small numbers of psychiatrists. I don't know how many psychiatrists there are in Indonesia. Most of them are around Jakarta, I think. In the rest of Indonesia, don't have many. So how do you change this, right? 70% of kids actually need some kind of an assessment, but they're stuck in the schools and social services in the current model. And another 20% are seeing their primary care physicians. We created REACH, okay? Response, Evaluation and Assessment in Community Mental Health. The idea was really to say, okay, maybe you don't need to see all the kids in the hospital. You need to see them where they are. Schools and social services. They already have people who deal with these children. Can we upskill them and can we help them? So we send out teams to work with all of these people by setting up a helpline for them, create capability building at the schools level, and establish community networks with the GPs to really link everyone up so that they can manage. In a nutshell, we have now evolved the system where we reach all the schools in Singapore. Now, Singapore's a small little city, but we have about 372 schools, and we have about 500,000 kids. They were seeing counselors, and we supported the counselors. They no longer needed to come to the hospitals all the time. Every time there's a problem, we will deal with it. We developed a networking system where we did case conferences, calls, and we brought in hospitals as needed. So what eventually came to the hospital, is about 800 only, out of 55,000 that in the past would want to come to the hospital. We only needed to see 800. Our waiting times are slashed. Today, if you go to Singapore and you need to see a child psychiatrist, it's less than a month. In fact, you can see tomorrow as well. When I get back, not tomorrow, next week. When I get back, you could get to see me because we have created space for the specialists to work and a community program. What that has done for REACH and the levels of care is that we've been able to sort of integrate a little bit at this level, and then we created programs at the mid-level to deal with the children where they are in the homes. And we recently won an award, a national award, for this 10-year program that we developed. But that's this part of the picture. There's another piece that we need to develop, an educational self-care system. Remember, health promotion is not about the healthcare system at all. It's actually further down the road. So we change our little journey. And now let's talk about, we talked about systems. Let's talk specifics, serious games. I got interested in serious games, not because games are something that I wasn't familiar with. I actually play a lot of games. I love games from young. I remember all through my school years, I was playing games. I moved from board games to digital. And I've seen all the iterations of FIFA, from 2003 until 2018. And I think they are launching the 2019 FIFA, a couple of days from now, right? In a couple of weeks, 2 weeks time, I think. So the games have changed a lot. But serious games are a little different. Okay, this is just to showcase that we had a collaboration with our healthcare group and our Nanyang Technological University to set up Alive, okay, which is a gaming platform, a gaming support platform. It's a grant that we try to develop gaming. It's labor intensive, it's person centric, therapeutic focus. You know, most of us will say, oh, I want to see a doctor because the doctor has a relationship with us. So that therapeutic alliance is important. It requires individualized care. And a lot of psychiatrists says technology serves to hinder this practice because technology interferes with the one-to-one relationship, takes away the holistic elements of illness. But technology integrated is not to take away the one-to-one, it's to enhance it. It's to make it more available. Today, what I used to see in my clinic, I can do with patients at home. We can video conference. You may say, oh, in the telemedicine psychiatry has always been practiced in countries where large distances, like say in Indonesia, where you are in Jakarta and your patient is in, far away in Irian Jaya, and there's no psychiatrist. So we can do telepsychiatry. But actually, you can do it in Jakarta too, because in Jakarta, if it's peak hour, you go to see the psychiatrist, it will take you 2 hours, right? Or more. And then you take another 2 hours to come home. That's half a day. If you did this, technology enabled, you could be at your home, you could interact. And how is that interaction done? Is it like this, video conferencing? Is it using technology or even, game-like in its purpose? So there's a lot of things that we can do with technology to integrate into healthcare. We just haven't tried it. So that's my interest. It started. This is I'm letting you in on my age, but ELIZA was created the year I was born. ELIZA is a program that I was interested in playing on the Apple computer back then, when in the 70s, where it would talk to you. I don't know whether you're familiar with ELIZA. It's an interactive program. It's very fun. It's like Siri today. You try Siri, right? Siri can be infuriating. ELIZA was just as infuriating, but people like to play with it. 1990s, electronic cognitive behavior therapy already started. So this is many years ago, it's not recent. In 2003, there are more biofeedback games. The problem with some of this is that the promise was so great and people thought it would answer everything. Of course it doesn't. But there's been, remission is actually a game for cancer patients to teach them about their treatments. So the concept of e-health, e-therapy, and gamification, and eventually serious games, is wholly based on the idea that can we gamify things? Now, I don't walk very much and I don't exercise very much. But nationally, we've now got a program called the 10,000 Steps Challenge. It's a gamification of walking. So in fact, our government has tried this and it works very well. When we took part in it, we were very motivated to walk because your walking steps gets you to a prize. It's a gamification concept. So gamification is very important in health promotion and also in prevention. Now, a lot of times we say healthcare is at this end, but games and gamification is supposed to lead us to some kind of self-care that is health promotion leading and prevention seeking. Okay, how do you do that? Well, in the first step, you could gamify what you currently do in your clinics. For example, if a child comes to you and they see you, you could give them motivational incentives, very much like games, to help them. Or you could develop serious games at the population level for all to play. This comes to this whole concept of how we can use a theoretical basis of games to help us in healthcare, right? This social constructivist model, it's a very simple model. It's about scaffolding. When you build a house, you create scaffolding, then it's easier to build because you can step on one another and you make it, the learner achieve the targets that you want. In healthcare, it's the same thing. You want patients, for example, to have a good lifestyle. You want them to sleep better. You want them to take more steps. What can you do to encourage that? You give them reminders. You give them rewards for every step of the way. If you go and take a walk and you do certain steps, you get certain points. So in our National Steps Challenge, it's not like you must do 10,000 steps every day. It's 10,000 steps, but whatever steps you do, you get some points and you can get rewards and you can exchange them. So you collect a certain number of points. So it's a graduated process. And that's the most fun for a lot of people. The other part is the challenge when you run in teams. So they started suggesting that people run as walk as families or walk in their workplaces as teams. So these are scaffoldings that increase the chances of change. The other piece of theory that I think is important is that when you play a game, you need to make sure that there's some degree of fulfillment in which you can relate, you have some autonomy and control, and the competency is within your level. When I first started playing FIFA soccer, I wasn't very good with my hands. They made it simple. For those people who are not so good, you're a beginner. Very easy. The computer aids you, right? So you can, I can score goals, man. Whereas my son, who is much more, he wants to play at professional level, right? So if you help the competency, you achieve fulfillment. They enjoy the game. So it has to be graduated, cannot be, the same level for everyone. And so when we develop games, we must think of that, who we're developing it for. And then obviously there is a social cognitive piece to this. The learning must sort of give link up with their social environment. And this is where culture is very important. What is culturally acceptable when you develop games? It cannot sort of hit on hidden taboos or what we call no-go zones for countries and societies. It has to be in areas that people find acceptable socially. So when we develop games, all these must be considered. In serious games and for health, I think there are lots of scope in healthcare, both in therapy and specifically for health promotion. What I'm actually showing here is the concept that you can do it in health promotion as you can do it in intervention, prevention, and treatment. That's the title for this. So what is the intention of serious games? Really creating a fun way to achieve certain goals and targets. People have different specific aims, all right? Whether it's about illness. So this is what we call probably secondary prevention, or maybe even primary prevention. Specific skills, this one can be a health promotion effort. And treatment interactions, that's more like secondary, tertiary prevention, or no longer prevention, it's just specific treatments. Why do I show this slide is really because you need to understand that there's a human subject, there's interface devices that the game exists on. The game can exist in a computer, in a personal mobile device, and there's always an interface. Today, we have a lot more interface. The human subject hasn't changed very much, but remember I said right at the beginning, our brains are always changing. The brains have been evolving because of the digital world they're in. So young people today are probably more attuned to games than they ever was because they are introduced to it very early. Okay, so let's start with the human subject. This is the famous brain of famous Homer Simpson. Homer Simpson is, his brain is here. His environment, he takes a lot of donuts, right? And these are his genes, his father. How do these interact? Well, it interacts in a few ways. First, the input. Whatever comes from the environment, in this case, maybe through his eyes or his ears, you need to have attention. You need to have emotions that's linked to that. You have this part of the brain that's like the CEO of the brain, okay? It's an executive functioning piece. It does planning, organizing, monitoring, and evaluating behavior. So whenever there's an input, it goes through this sort of processes. There's an attentional piece that makes sure that the information is gathered in. There's the emotions piece. So every information is kind of evaluated. And then there's the executive function piece that tries to coordinate it. And then you try and remember it. And that's simply put, that's how the brain works. Then behavior follows. All right? And that's the brain. Now, how does the brain then interact with the environment? It is really through relationships. Okay? In the old days, it is a physician-patient relationship. There are links. But today, there are more things like online relationships, avatars, even AI that can create relationships. It's an interesting concept, and we never think about that. We always assume that you only need human relationships. But with technology, you can augment it, you can enhance it. Then you have the interface devices, all right? I'm sure you're all familiar with the games. I'm going to show this video because it's too long. But when the Xbox Kinect came out, they had very flashy, stories to tell and how people will interact with it. Didn't seem to work as well as I think it had hoped, but the idea, the concept was there. And then today, the personal mobile device. I think that's really taken off. Everyone has a handphone. In Singapore, apparently, we have more handphones, cell phones than people. All right, about 2 per person. And I've seen people use these devices. We are now thinking about how we can understand people's behavior through their devices. So there's a whole school of thought on digital phenotyping, which is basically trying to look at the person through their use of device. There's also a lot of feedback devices now. This used to be a VR technology. Can you imagine how clunky and it's less intrusive today? All right. I understand yesterday Apple just announced the release of the Apple Watch 4, which now can take your ECG, which is interesting. So you can collect a lot of impulses. And what does that mean in terms of feedback to the individuals? I have some videos here that whether I can click on it and show you.
Hello, nice to see you.
So this is actually a robot, a social robot.
I am a social companion. I can speak with emotions and I can recognize people. I recognize you, Nadia. Nice to meet you.
Okay, so that's a social robot. There's Naimi. This is actually a device. This is from their advert. I think the device is available on Kickstarter. And that's the concept, right? You can do lots of stuff. I don't have a Samsung video. I tried to, but the Samsung video on the smart dress. I won't go too much into this. Why I wanted to show is, of course, the actual device didn't have all those functionalities that it was trying to advertise for, but that was the promise. Actually, what's interesting now is that some of these devices have gone into the Internet of Things, right? I'm wearing a watch now. You see this watch? Okay, it looks like a watch, right? This is like the Apple Watch in some ways, all right? And it's from this company in Switzerland called Frederick Constant, right? I'll show you what they are promising.
Frédéric Constant presents its beautiful luxury Swiss watch, smart and connected, the horological smartwatch. A high-quality handmade watch manufactured using fine materials, crafted with typical Swiss luxury watch finishing, and offering connected functionality. So, how to use your Frédéric Constant horological smartwatch? Download the MMT 365 app.
Yeah, I won't go there. You can Google this. But the whole concept is now devices are everywhere. They're collecting information. How do we leverage on that? How do we gamify some of this? How do we think about how they can interface? Because feedback is a powerful tool to help. And it's the scope is amazing. Okay, so clothes can be smart, shoes can be smart. We know that. I think Samsung had some attempts at this the last couple of years as well. The Oculus, of course. Sorry.
Hello, nice to see you.
Frédéric Constant presents.
Let me move to the next slide. Okay, so let's understand games a little bit. What do games represent? There are three things, really. when you develop a game, you need to know the mechanics of how it works, how it interacts, and the aesthetics, which is upfront. How does it work with people? Now, games, if they are digital, this might be important, but really, I think the key to any game is the mechanics. It's the way you design it to interface, and remembering in mind that you have an interface device, presumably as part of the game. So the game objectives are important. These are some of the things I've learned. It's not really in my training as a doctor, but I think that it's important to think first of all at the self-efficacy level. Again, this is a health determinant, so it's at the health promotion level. One of the things you can do, you may have targeted precursors of health. For example, stress management. So you can do specific training, relaxation, stress management, or social emotional learning, teaching emotional regulation to young people. Specific illness behavior, which is what we call psychoeducation. And then, of course, if you're ill, can you do treatment? These are the concepts that when you design a game, you have to think about. And then you will get a target. There isn't a perfect game out there now that demonstrates all of these. They're probably in parts. Now, I wanted to show this slide because I think it's quite interesting. A lot of learning that we have today is formal. So we have a very explicit purpose. But I think people like to do fun things. They don't want a formal class. So they want to have fun. How do you sort of do that and be able to learn, tell stories, and play games? They do interact. So games are games, all of you. I mean, some of you who are bored probably playing some game back there, I don't know. So these are explicitly games. Then there are games that I have written. Is this from your echo from Kumara? Okay, games that have a storytelling piece to it. They add on to this, right? There are, of course, video games that are very specific. They are games, but they also are like a movie. In fact, they become movies, you know. And then we have, and this is an Indonesian example, really. It's storytelling in video movie, which people watch because it's very moving. This particular movie, The Mirror Never Lies, is about a girl. I don't know whether you're all familiar with this story. It's about a girl searching for her father who's passed away. And she always carries a mirror because she believes that you can find the father who's lost, I think, in the sea. Storytelling can be interactive and lead to learning. And obviously, there are educational, very specific educational games. Serious games actually sit right in the middle of all of this. All right, the ability to play a game, tell a story, and learn at the same time. This is one example that is published in New Zealand. It's called Sparks. It's a specific storytelling game that treats depression in young people, and they've shown that it works. The problem is the game is still in the university. It's not in widespread use. I can't buy it, and that's the story of Sparks. I wouldn't show the slide, but it's like an adventure game. These are some of the things that, when we realized that there's the potential for games over the years, we tried to do various things. We created a website. This was created 10 years ago. It's now archived. It's called Rock and Ash. It's a game that helps kids with ADHD and anxiety. We created a game that's specifically for selective mutism. These are kids who would speak normally, but when they go to school, they're quiet like a mouse. So we had a game. It's called Mickey Mouse. And then we also look at social robots now, and then we try to train kids with autism through it. We tried our hand at virtual reality games, specifically against selective mutism. It's kind of a scenario based. And then this, Kogoland. I'm going to talk a little bit about Kogoland because I know I'm running out of time, so I'll go into this a little bit more. Kogoland was something that we developed. You see, in IMH, in the Institute of Mental Health, we see children with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's a huge problem. Prevalence can be about 6 to 7% of the population, so we're talking about a large number of children. A lot of them now, with our REACH program in the community, are picked up early and they're dealt with. All the interventions are in community. But some of them need medications, they come to our clinics. But we only have medication as a treatment alongside psychosocial interventions which require one-to-one interaction. we were looking for a solution that people could do on their own and train their kids. So we basically sat down with a bunch of engineers, computer engineers, to think, what is the problem in ADHD? Can we understand it better? And I'll give you a little snippet of it, just to cite this, show you. This is a video with an American company that we work with, who's been licensed to develop this game further. And this is their sort of their video in the US.
I was in denial for years. I remember when she was a young kid, I thought, is this normal behavior?
She wouldn't even hear my voice.
He tended to be very distractible. He wasn't quite sure why he was doing it.
Why is he not paying attention? Why isn't he hearing me when I talk to him?
When it came to reading comp and language arts, he was close to the failing line, if not underneath it.
Hayden started to complain and say, "Mom, I don't like school because I feel dumb."
The child isn't able to access the curriculum, not able to learn what they need to learn. And usually there are problems at home as well.
When my mind starts to drift, I have a hard time keeping focus. I would doodle and I would miss lots of things, so I would get bad grades on tests.
We were struggling with her, but we were not getting help.
Attention is such a central part of peak performance that anything you can do to improve your ability to focus will improve your performance.
I was thrilled when I heard about Attentive. I really wanted to try other techniques and see if there were some other options, other structured techniques, whatever, to support her.
No parent wants to put their child on medication. They don't want to make that decision. They're always very interested in other options.
Recently, I've started playing a game called Kogoland. You have a headband strapped to your head, and you use your attention to control a bird on screen to run through a maze.
When you're doing attentive training, you're actually exercising those nerve cells in your prefrontal cortex to make new connections and thereby improve your executive functioning and the coordination of your entire brain.
It's pretty cool that it can kind of sense what my mind is thinking and know how much I'm focused.
When I was looking at the screen, so if I blinked, it moved down. When I was paying really attention like this, it went faster.
It knows what your brain's electrical activity looks like when you're focused and what it looks like when you're unfocused.
Curtis in the game would only move when he stayed focused on him. So he realized he'll only access information from a teacher when he stays focused on the teacher.
It does give you a sense of self-awareness in terms of becoming more in touch with how your mind works.
The beauty of the attentive system, in my opinion, is the kids like to do it.
It's a game that I fully believe in. It's a process that I believe in.
Since we've done this process, I would say school has been 100% better.
Whatever you're doing, do it again. Keep doing it because he's a whole different boy.
When he accesses the information and stays focused, he's more engaged. And when he's more engaged, he's happier. And he comes home and he likes school.
There's no doubt that this system could help every child.
What the attentive game did for Hayden was it was competitive enough. It was a challenge to him, and he was up for it.
If I could get my hands on a band and a software game right now, I would sit him down 20 minutes a day. And I am 1,000% convinced that at the end of doing this at 20 minutes a day for 3 months, he would look very different than he would.
So that's our attentive game. And that is the immediate lead on to what I'm going to talk about, which is the example. All right. So, all cats have autism spectrum disorder, Asperger, and all dogs have ADHD, right? You understand it. If you've seen animals, you understand it. So what is ADHD? ADHD is really defined by various symptoms: inattention and hyperactivity and impulsivity. It must occur in many situations, more than not just in school, but also at home. And these figures are for adult diagnosis. So you must have 6. If you are adult, maybe 5. Should occur before the age of 12. But if you're an adult, as long as you have some evidence that you're before 12, for children before the age of 7. All right. not explained by some other disorder and creates an impaired functioning. That's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, as defined by the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. The National Institute of Mental Health in the US has talked about this research domain criteria of looking at disorders, so that ADHD is not just about those symptoms. It's really about something wrong with the brain, which parts of the brain, and are there endophenotypes that we can understand. So the biggest, of course, is this concept of inhibition and attention. We know that ADHD affects kids very differently. The way they play games, the way they interact on the internet. So in fact, ADHD kids play more games, they visit communities, they look at pornography a lot more, but they did less chatting and they didn't like to do homework online. All right. If you study the ADHD in relation to aggression, when they play risk games, this is Ultimatum game is a very interesting game. There's a certain amount of money you give to players. Suppose there are two persons. All right. We offer you, if you have $100 and you say, okay, I keep 70, you take 30, you accept it. If you accept it, you keep the money and then you continue to play. But there's a certain degree of fairness. So if you give 50-50, most people will accept. If I keep 70 and you take 30, some people will say, some won't. If you take 80 and I give you 20, most people will say that's unfair, I refuse to accept it. So the game is to see whether you can provide enough money and then earn enough money. So they studied this in ADHD and kids without ADHD controls. What they found is that children with ADHD, but they had high aggression, they actually had a significant difference in what they construe as moderately unfair. That means in a game, the fairness factor is very important in the aggressive ADHD kids. All right, so that's another thing. Now, I know this is highly technical, but the idea was that we could train. So just now that game that you saw, what we did was we calibrated the child's attention span in a pre-game calibration. After which we try to train the child towards that attentive EEG pattern. In the traditional EEG training, they are trying to look at different types of brain waves and assuming that all the kids with ADHD have a certain pattern. So our game is a little different. We assume nothing. We just assume that when someone is attentive, they have a certain pattern. We try to train that pattern, and that's what it does. Now, we also wanted to see how the brain changes when we do the training. So a lot of the times in ADHD, and to make this simple, this is neuroimaging, all right? There is short range overconnectivity. That means within the local area, the prefrontal cortex, there is too much connections because the prefrontal cortex is not very well developed. So there's a lot of connections. And there's an underconnectivity to the rear parts of the brain. What we thought would be great if we can demonstrate that we change this when we play the game. All right, we'll talk about that in a while. So this is the traditional EEG training is really about, and people who have done this feedback with EEG is they assume that this theta beta ratios, right? Theta and beta are two types of brainwave pattern, have a certain pattern to all kids with ADHD, and they've tried to demonstrate this in a number of studies where you do neurofeedback training, you will see the changes, all right, pre and post, there are differences. And based on this, there is actually now a device in that's FDA approved in the US. But as far as we know, that it's not taken off. And there's a lot of queries about whether this is in fact effective. So this is one way of looking at it. That means we try to train the brain towards a set pattern versus one that is more dynamic. Now, neurofeedback training and its effects, this is what we call meta-analysis. Do they really improve? There's some studies that favored, some are, when they hit the central line means it's not really. And so it's more effective for things like inattention, but not so effective for hyperactivity, impulsivity. Okay, so this is just some background. Now, what we are doing, the brain-computer interface, is the idea of picking up the EEG and use it as a feedback for the person to change behavior. Traditionally, brain-computer interface is used to move things. All right, so you have a brain-computer interface. You can move your wheelchair. You can move your artificial arm. What we try to do is really to use the EEG to create an attentional score, compute it, and then provide the feedback through a game. And that's the process of using BCI into a game-based solution. The concept again is frontal lobe processing and specifically on attention. All right. I won't go into this in detail. I mean, we published the data. You can go and look at this. So we've published a pilot data in PLOS, which is a very reasonably good journal. This was our original device. So you can see what you saw on the video was just a frontal lobe, 2 leads. This is a traditional EEG device. And the original game before Kogoland was just a racing car game when we first started. And we showed that in the intervention group, we improve attention. This is Kogoland, 3 basic levels. I won't go into it, but you can see they only have 2 frontal leads. The idea is to make it simpler. And they play this game. They move this avatar. This avatar can be, you can customize it to your favorite. I think they have several characters. Like there's a dinosaur and then this duck-like thing. And then it moves. And it moves through a preset. Then 3 levels. The basic level is just move. The advanced level, you have to move and then go up there and catch some fruits. All right, so you have to do some motor activity. It's quite difficult to, first you have to calibrate the headband to the individual, make sure that they have an attention score that we want to work towards, and then they play the game. And they play it like this, you know, every week you come 3 times a week and for half an hour. Now what we've done with this is that we've now done a large scale randomized controlled trial. We have 172. The RCT is not published, but we published the imaging study, which is a smaller group, about I think it's less than 20 kids. And the idea, again, is what I explained to you, changing the connectivity of the brain. I know this is too technical, but if you're interested, this is the journal, which is Translational Psychiatry. This is it's a fairly high impact journal. And we've been able to show that there's firstly improved in attention, especially the inattentive scores, but overall they've also improved. And okay, this is the inattention scores have shown significant improvements across different time points. Sorry, my slides didn't show us. And what was interesting is this idea that we've actually changed. All right, these are various networks. So remember, we had the short local networks versus the long range networks to the back of the brain. Prefrontal cortex, local networks, and the long range networks have changed with treatment. All right, I won't go too much into it. So actually, games do change our brains, and quite significantly. And there needs to be more research in this. Only way to do this kind of research is to really interface what engineers create and what healthcare providers do. I think there is a need for greater awareness of this by healthcare professionals, that there is that interface that needs to be done. We need to do more research, more effectiveness studies in terms of randomized controlled trials, and more studies on the brain and how games interact, possibly integrating some of this physical and mental health aspects. We need to think about game design. How is it developmentally appropriate? How do we create a culturally tailored, contextual tailored game? And of course, using the wearable sensor technologies that's available. And of course, there are some ethical issues that you have to bear in mind, the blurring of boundaries, right? Healthcare is no longer in the realm of healthcare. And then, of course, this question of whether there are addiction risks, right? Because we said at the beginning, you know, you play a lot of game, you develop a gaming disorder. Can you make sure that that doesn't happen? So it's how you design the game to make sure that all of these things are in play, and then do more research to understand this. I thought I'd end off with this. These are some of the people that we acknowledge in the work. In 2 years' time, we're going to have a World Congress on Child Psychiatry. We will present our findings at that meeting. And again, you know, I don't know whether this is the right audience to ask, but please come to Singapore if you're interested. I have some brochures. If you're interested, I can pass it to you. We are trying to see how we can create a lifelong mental health system in Singapore and the world, really. So thank you very much. Just some pictures of my family. I'm sorry that I really took my full hour. I'm happy to answer questions. Do we have time for that, or we move on? We have time? Okay. Anyone ask questions? I went rather quickly on the last bit, but because it's a published journal, you can read the article yourself. Yes. Is that someone? No. Thought someone put up. Sorry.
Do you have a question for Dr. Daniel? Anyone's
clarifications, snide remarks?
Right.
Frederick Constant, you can buy it online. So, so my Frederick Constant, when I arrived, it's not by Samsung. Samsung needs to work with a watch company, a Swiss watch company, to make a really nice, horological smartwatch. I really like the idea of the horological smartwatch because it is a watch. But when I arrived in Indonesia, we're 1 hour ahead of Singapore, right? Or behind Singapore. It automatically corrects once I sync with my smartphone. Echo, yes.
About the research of using game, and it should be like tailored to the cultural context and so on and so on, and related to public health or health promotion. How significant is the cultural context for the public, for the health promotion overall, based on your knowledge?
Well, I'll put it this way. In Singapore, they spend a lot of time trying to get healthy lifestyle into the population. This started back in 1992. I was on that committee. We had 4 pillars, smoking, eating well, physical activity, and mental health, stress management as the 4 pillars of a healthy lifestyle. So we did a lot of publicity. So a lot of times health promotion was just creating awareness, and people just didn't move. There was no motivation. And yet Singapore is a very competitive society. So what worked with the National Steps Challenge and the Health Promotion Board was, it was a game. It was a challenge. And when it became a challenge, and now it's an ongoing challenge. So every year they do this. And it's, remember, it's in line with the national effort. Health is not just mental health, physical health. A lot of the world looks at it this way. Actually, it's all of health. At health promotion level, all the physical health, mental health correlates. That's why I mentioned, I go back to that slide. They are integrated. So physical activity is good for both physical health and mental health. And there's lots of evidence of this. So can we get people to do it? So the games is the tool. It's the enabler. The target, the goal is to create overall good health. There's another question there.
When I work with different helping them to design gamification or game concept, we have this kind of culture. I mean, I'm not saying in general, but most of the company just like take all the concept for granted from the West. I mean, this kind of gamification. And let's use this kind of thing. Let's use, because my advice is always, I think we need to look to the cultural context of the company. We need to look to the cultural context of Indonesia and to make a better game and to motivate people. But somehow I always find it's very challenging to convince them because they always look that that's too difficult. I call it. Let's make it like in the US. Let's make it in the.
Well, it's the business model, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the business model. So, but my point is that just to why I'm asking this, because I believe Indonesia is the best place to create game that solve solution, because I think we have the best ingredient in the world. We have the every world problem in Indonesia, and I think we can make a lot of things out of it. And I need your work on that because it's live. Yeah, so so it's important to create the game without the culture.
No, the powerful piece of what you're saying is exactly this. Remember, I started off saying that there's an East and West approach. And the Eastern approach is less individualistic, it's about community. And so that's cultural, right? And you can't just translate that to different parts of the world. What the West has to offer is that they have business models and companies that really set up that are looking at this specifically. We don't have that, but we have governments that can move things broader. So that's where that's question back and yeah.
Sorry. Thank you very much for your talk. I really enjoyed that. One of the questions I had was just on, have you done any comparative studies, specifically on the long-term effectiveness of these interventions? I'll use myself as an example. I've been on anti-ADHD medication for a long time, and I have tried to play some of these games, and you will take my Ritalin out of my cold, dead hands, frankly. But one of the issues we find with games, even commercial games, is children don't pay attention for more than 2 or 3 weeks before they get bored with it, regardless of even how complex the game is. So how do you deal with that boredom factor in something that requires a long-term therapy? Because one of the papers I've seen in this are looking at the effectiveness, but in the very, very short term. So people will be part of a study for a week and then stop. But we know that the trail-off is massive. So,
absolutely. I agree with you. The problem with randomized controlled trial, and that's a weakness in the design. RCTs are gold standard today for treatment. But RCTs, the longest RCTs are not more than 16 weeks, I think. So you only see those kind of effects, and that's why it's informing you. You're absolutely right. It informs, and this is the same for medications. So even with Ritalin, I mean, I'd like to say that sometimes there's also a certain psychological dependence on this, which happens, and it's very hard for some of the kids. I, as a practitioner, always try to do these drug holidays. We talk about discontinuing medications because I use medication as a concept for a crutch. Now, back to your question about how do we study this? You need to do longitudinal studies. You need to obviously think about how games have to evolve. And you know that, right? That's why FIFA releases a new release every year. We need to create games that are upgradable and changing, and you have different modules to increase that motivation and interest. And that's how we do with our national games. So the National Steps Challenge goes into new areas every year when they start. And you need to think about that. A game isn't just created as a static thing, and it should be a dynamic, ongoing process. In fact, in most of and this is business model really, you realize, right? Microsoft sells its software, and all its software, many software companies do this now. It's a subscription model. You pay, and then it funds an ongoing development, and it should be that way. I don't see a game as standalone because people expect a change. Otherwise, you wouldn't play it. The other thing, of course, is in our study, what we've done is, remember training. It's like going to the gym, right? You go to the gym, you work out some muscles, and that lasts for a while. If you stop going to the gym, those muscles will, go back to its original state, but get converted to fat. So there is a need for continuing. The question is, what's the degree? Do you have to do a lot to get at that level or not? So that's where we're at. I mean, I don't have an absolute answer, just that we need to evolve the system. We need an ecosystem that can sustain it. So serious games is an area where today I think the business models are kind of weak. A lot of it is grants, and you do a lot of work with advertising and marketing, but very much less in healthcare. So there's a need to develop this further. That's why we started up grant agencies to increase research. Long-term outcomes for this, I have no answer at this point. All I can say is that in our study, we did a 1-year follow-up. The effects are sustained over more than just a few weeks. It's for months. The problem, of course, is, like you said, after a while, will they still want to play? And this is true of a number of companies that have been set up. For example, CogMed. CogMed is a company that's set up to train your working memory. And it's very effective. It's published widely. It's developed by the Karolinska Institute in Sweden. But it doesn't have the long-term effect that a lot of times people fall off because of motivational. It's a terribly boring exercise. And when it's terribly boring, it's a problem. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Thank you very much.
Right. Any more question? Oh yeah, from the ladies.
Thank you. I'm very enjoy your presentation and useful information. I'm curious about your slide for the storytelling, games and learning.
Storytelling. This, yeah. I'm killing my system. This
Yeah.
one? This slide?
Yes.
Yeah.
Storytelling, learning,
Yeah.
and games. I want to know more about the what the interface between storytelling, learning, and games. And then the second question is the what the sample accurate we can implementation in the education and this concept can be do in a company to be
Like a business model is.
yes to
Okay.
be a business model.
Okay. Well, firstly, there's a business model for each of these things, right? Storytelling, the most obvious is a book, right? You read a book. It's a dying industry. We were talking about it, publishing. But people are reading ebooks, or they like interactive. They watch a movie. A movie is a book in video form, visual form. And that's still very engaging. People still go to the movies. I'm sure you watch movies. So that's where storytelling lies. Games, on the other hand, has a certain degree of interactivity. Storytelling is listening, right? You sit down there and you hear the story, and it's given to you as a story. When you are playing a game, you interact. So when you have a game that's storytelling, you are interacting with that game, interacting with the story. You become part of the story. There have been examples of this. So when I was a kid, there's a lot of these books that take you from different scenarios. Then you make a decision. There's a decision point. You change the story. So the story goes with you. So you become part of that story. You can do this with digital a lot. Is there a market for this? I think so. Certainly young people, because people like the ability to tell their own story. And if you create that scenario, it's possible. And you can combine it as a game. The only thing is, again, the boredom factor. So your story must keep telling. So, Halo is a good example. It's gone into Halo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they got different sub-genres, sort of to tell the story, the big story, the whole universe that you create. I mean, Game of Thrones is storytelling. There's also gamification. There's a whole market for that. So it depends on where you come from. Is there a business model? I think there is. It's entertaining, but it's just entertaining unless you make the story meaningful for specific teaching purposes that can help in the person's. Tomorrow in my talk, I will talk about such an example. It's called Ragnar Tales. It's an app that we created. A little bit about that. So if you're interested, come for tomorrow's talk. It's slightly different. I'll talk about that. Yeah. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Right. So that's the last question from the keynote speaker. So please give a round of applause to Professor.
Yes, the awesome sharing session, right?
Of course, yeah. It's very inspiring. I mean, that's back to remind me back when I was doing my internship in Singapore. I'm not a game lover, but I'm just doing a game to get a relax. But today I just realized game can affect in many ways.
Education for mental health and
Correct. Yeah. Do you have any special games, Kim? I mean, like.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Right. So next, we'd like to invite our second keynote speaker. It's Dr. Alfred Budiman. But before that, please allow me to give a brief intro for Dr. Alfred, as he is an experienced senior management who has implemented changes to answer business and technology need across a number of areas in the software, research, development, and telecommunication sector. Dr. Alfred is also a young professor at University of Chicago Graduate School of Business for Asia campus. He's also advisor for Policy Center of Entrepreneurship. So please welcome Dr. Alfred to the podium.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, actually morning, almost afternoon. Well, I don't know whether I can use my slides, but definitely, if don't slide, it doesn't matter. It's no, that is the slides, but I don't know whether I can use the slides or not. Okay, no slides, fine. No, because I send the slides, but it's okay. But if don't have slides, it doesn't matter. Because actually, I would like to answer several questions. I mean, why I'm being invited in here in this session is quite interesting because definitely when you're talking about games, why Samsung? Well, I came from Samsung. I'm an engineer, I'm a researcher, wannabe. But it's always a question that I'm coming to the campus that is very beautiful. It's pretty in terms of facility and people. But the other things also, when you're talking about games, well, I would like to claim myself I'm a bit ADHD. Yeah, why? Because I love games. Sometimes ago, I play games called Ragnaroks. Anybody play Ragnaroks? Right. It's long times ago. I know that. But in the other things that, if you know games that, but I like to play game in very shortcut. Why? I like to cheat. I'm just being honest. Well, I don't do computer science. I'm in the wrong major on my university. I'm electrical engineer. Want to be again in the wrong major in the power systems, which is I'm not going to be working for PLN, which is for the power companies. Uh, my second master, or my master degree, I'm going for robotics, which is also wrong major because I don't know how to work about robots. And when I took my further studies, I took the other thing called financial mathematics, econometric and statistics in the wrong major again, which is I'm trapped in Samsung. Okay, further to say that when I play Ragnaroks or something like that, it's always a question that how I want to, how I want to win. That's enjoyment how to play games, right? You want to win, you want to be famous, you want to have yourself. It's called ego. Probably that's probably Dr. Fung tried to explain ego. Right now, I'm trying to buy my ego for you guys to seeing me. You know how there is a research and surveys that said how long that human or people can focus in terms of the topics. 8 minutes. That's a research that came from the device itself. How people can focus into a specific things. 8 minutes. So I'm trying to buy your focus for 8 minutes right now. Right? Before you going 30-degree of your sitting session, which is you're going to your device. Right? This is not psychological or philosophical kind of things, but that's a fact that as a device company called Samsung, I'm trying to learn about cognitive behavior of our users. How to do that? People said that, oh, smartphones, intelligence. There is no smartphones. There is just a phones of how the smartphones will work without the internet connection. It's not smart. It's stay there, right? But there is also further research that they can say that, oh, in the other things, well, there is called on-device AI. There is another things. What is on-device AI? Well, the device, it's become intelligence. Smart. Okay, it works. Well, actually, I'm trying to bring human loop in loop gamification, But I actually I really kind of enjoy when I did some conference, something like that. I like enjoy in terms of discussion. Hello. Oh, sorry. This is the way. I don't like presentation actually. This is the things that I do into my management in terms of my organization. I don't do PowerPoints because PowerPoints is only for people don't have PowerPoints to. So if they need to present to me, they need to bring spreadsheet and just talk what is the cost. So I believe since this is a kind of conference, I would like we are all to study, and if you have anything, ask, just ask. Don't wait, okay? What's going on in terms of the in Samsung itself, and everybody knows that Samsung is a device company. So we know that the technology is moving and global digitalization is there. Everybody in here, I believe, is using smartphones. Anybody using Samsungs? Please, sir. Please say. Well, if you guys using Samsung, I need to say thank you very much for paying my salary. Thank you for paying my salary. Pleasure. If you also using Apple, I would like to say that thank you also because Apple is buying our chips, right? Right. But the other things, but whatever the device, I mean, the device itself, the chipset, the screens, well, even the operating systems. So the behavior of the mobile business in terms of the technology, it's growing. It's come from the from the sensor itself. Right now, Dr. Fung earlier mentioned that he has a wearables that connected that acknowledge sending data about his health. Actually, me too. Well, I'm being actually dictated by device, for God's sakes. Why? I sit over there, I keep looking my watch because he keep telling move. Because I'm sitting too long. Right? So that's kind of the things why you need to move. Because the device also learning the behavior about the constants of the data that you being put, your height, your weight, your behavior, your blood pressure, accuracy. It's also a question mark. It's also a question mark. Even I'm working in Samsung. I have also wearables. That's why I want to promote to everybody's to using Samsung Watch. No, just kidding. No, because actually, my research is I'm researching for artificial intelligence and data. So I need data from you guys. I need data from the user as well. So the data is being collected. Of course, it's related with the sensor data, the user data, and the device data itself. But what I would like to say in here, the smart devices is very growing rapidly right now. Everybody's having devices. I just mentioned to Dr. Raymond Kusala. Well, the prediction on 2025, Indonesia will become number 4 largest smartphone market in the world, which is comprising 352 billion in terms of the devices. So imagine that one guy having 2 phones. So I'm just asking you a question again. Anybody has still using this kind of phone? I don't think so. Only me. Why? Why I'm using that? I'm not drug dealers that nobody want to catch me, but it's stand the battery. All the things that having all the devices that you have it, that you still keep complaining, Samsung, the battery always drain. Yeah, right. Oh, sorry. No, well, I'm trying to say that actually every device is almost having the same problems. Why? It comes from the connection behind that internet, streaming, all the access. Apple also the same things. But you know what? There is a battery that actually can last longer. If you also read some article from NASA, from other things that they can like regenerate battery or recyclable battery as well. We have also the technology in Samsung we call a liquid battery, which is actually the problem is almost impossible to commercialize. The battery that you guys using is still it is a dry battery. So that's kind of the things that still constantly that will consume the energy that being transferred to the chipset, which is again that's creating that people want to connect with each other beyond the phone. You know what's the business that dead in terms of the device business? That for the past 5 years is a hard disk business. Big hard drive, small hard drive, tiny hard drive, micro SD, and now it's going to the cloud. Right? Second is what? Smartphone. I'm working for Samsung, but I can say that the smartphone is going to that. Yes. The next 5 to 10 years, it's soon, because it's going to where? It's called anywhere display. So there's already a prototype that can be embedded to the human teeth. It can be also like using the bones that calibrate the spectrum that can carry voice, which is I saw the prototype that you can using these things, wearables, put in your bones, in your jaw, and you can listen, something like that, nearby your ear. How can you do that? You can also try to find in Kickstarter that kind of technology. But again, these kind of things, what's going on in terms of digital transformation, sharing economy, blockchain, augmented reality, virtual reality, is the foundation that transforming people's life. You guys hold your phone more than your wife. That's the honest things. Because I hold my wife, well, she's in LA. But well, of course I hold my phones. But that's the things, right? I mean, that's also the significantly how the industry evolved from the technology itself. Even the gaming industry. The gaming industry, it came when I talked also to Raymond. He gave me, hey, there is something that Binus want to give it. It came from Binus itself. It's called board games. Wow, almost 20 years ago that I played board games. But it's amazing that it's still something that you're trying to gamify, because I'm probably like I don't know, maybe I'm a baby boomer, but I'm not like kind of really young, because well, actually Patirta mentioned, you're still young. Yes, thank you very much. But what I can say that it's about the mindset right now. Everything that called physical or conventional in trying to be moved to digital, and how to do that. It's the same, just like how you communicate and interact. What I'm trying to portray, what Dr. Fu mentioned about this kind of storytelling, learning, and that question, I would like to add, if you anybody in here watching a movie called Player One, that's a games. Is it sometimes in the future? No, it's there already. Why I can say like that? Because the producer made it. It's there already. It's using AR. It's partnership with Samsung. Well, it's also using with working with Microsoft. So actually, this is something that you guys still. That's also like kind of a question. Player One, very futuristic storytelling, advanced, very human touch games. But in the other things, there's also Flappy Bird. It's very contradictory. It's only less than 3 weeks. It gains a lot of users. And you know how many lines of codes that Flappy Birds is being made? It's less than 1 million codes line. I saw that. That is already in GitHub. So everybody that learn from computer science can download that and can see the sample codes, right? In the game industry, everything is changing. I came from statistics. I came from numbers, actually. Well, I can see that in terms of the device itself, the behavior of people playing games, using games, interact with the technology itself, it's shifting. Starting from something that we call it, at the beginning, I played games called Ragnarok, which is, well, damn. Well, actually, I already work, because it's long times ago. I play Ragnarok because I want to cheat. I create called bot, which is using Modcar. I'm the first that inventing the script for Modcar, called Kangta. That's my nickname. But how ADHD and serious that I'm ruining my, not young at the times, but at the times that I have a characters that everybody don't have it. I have a baby level 99, all super baby, something like that. How I do that? I'm wasting my time to creating something that I'm really addicted to make it that kind of games. I have 5 server at home, and to make it just only to make it that characters. Is that ADHD? Maybe I have ADHD. But it came from the bigger one, which is actually, when you see Ragnarok, it's called graphical, right? Even though that's graphical, it's 2D. But you know what I'm not using graphical. I'm using script, man. I'm just seeing the script. Oh, it's running, it's fighting. Oh, it text. I'm not seeing the script because I don't have time. I'm already work. Because you're using your code. It is running script. It's running script. Oh, I'm using phone and I'm trying to tethering to seeing my script, whether my script is running or not, my daemon is working or not. That's happened. But is that the games that you're looking for? It's a mindset, right? So that's the things that from the big screen to the small screen. People seeing that the trends that the mobile phone is growing, right? Kleiner Perkins mentioned about the internet trends that people trying to everything going to their mobile, everything going to diagnosing, going to playing games, going to interact, to communicate, everything is going right now to the mobile, right? Meanwhile, in terms of probably even the kids right now, so console games is getting very challenging situation because it merged to the PC games. That's kind of situation from the device or from the device manufacturer point of view. But in terms of the other things that make interesting about how to play games, about interaction, which is right now people can say, oh, artificial intelligence games, AI games. What is AI? If anybody knows about that. AI is a marketing. Same like big data, it's a marketing. Can you, or I don't know, probably Dr. Flo can explain it, in the medical or something like that, can mapping all the neuron on the mapping on the human brains for 6 billion people? I think it's almost impossible. Is there's a mapping, but there is sometimes the DNA, something like that. There's kind of tricky about that. So game of AI, in terms of what I'm trying to bring it in here, is something that you interact, that the things that your behavior, how to move, how to interact, and how to engage, something that you visualize your mindset. For example, the simple things, actually, it's happened that what Google did. Like or dislike, Google trying to bring something, when you type something, it always complete your sentence, right? Is that magical? No, it's not. It's a data. It's one of the thing as well. Google learning about not only your data or any UGC, user generated content that being put, but also something that imaging, that visioning that you're being put on the device. How to do that? Try to make a sample, write something using pen in S Pen or something like that, or probably, and keep it in Google Keep, your handwriting. And after that, search. Like or dislike, Google without your permission will search your handwriting. Is that AI? No, it's data, right? So at the end, it's talking about how to smart, how unpredictable but rational. So probably you probably heard that a long times ago that Deep Blue from IBM, that about game of chess, right? How chess player play with the computer, and computer won about that. Actually, it's about the logic of the character of the move. How many characters of chess playing move that probably you know? Gary Kasparov have the online course. They have about 5,000 characters of the move. More than 5,000, I believe. So imagine computer with the logic of speed comparing with the human, with the neuron that probably, well, survey says, probably Dr. Fung knows about that, only 20% of your brain capacity that can be fully utilized. 21% probably dolphin, right? But that's the fact. I'm probably only using 2%. But emotional influence also the other things, that body language to interact and being integrated with the environment. It's something that you can make games enjoyable, right? But how do you know about this? Is about Samsung now. Technology. I'm trying to say that my research area is talking about AI and data intelligence, but Samsung more focusing in terms of this kind of technology, vision, machine learning, NLP, optimization, planning, schedule, robotics, rule-based, and speech recognition. The things that I would like to say, if you guys using Samsung devices, thank you very much beforehand. But if you guys seeing there's a features called Smart View. Smart View patent it came from Indonesia, from my team, which is it's a behavior when you see your device, there's interactive movie or some things that moving, even games. If you put also game launcher and two camera on top of your device and you flip your eyes, it will pause. Is that smart? But that's the things actually how the device trying to interact based on the gyrometer of the device itself, the interaction of the device of the user, and basically the pattern of the data of the system itself. The things that this is some only sample from many others, right? Um, I think yeah, okay. Apple they did the same things, but the patent came from us. So it's facial recommendation expression. When Apple said there's a good marketing that well, Binus is partnering with Apple. It's fine. But I'm using MacBook as well. So, but it's from visual expression, but from the experience can smart glass. That's what I can say that anywhere display smart glass. The device will be no longer. I mean, smartphone will be no longer exist because right now there's a prototype that can be said that it's wearables, so it can project it, your screen anywhere, even to paper. So even that called virtually, haptic wise, it's moving from, I mean, back probably 10 years ago, we called Tom generation made by BlackBerry. So people using the QWERTY keyboard right now is using haptics, right? User experience also trying to move from touchscreen. That's happened also to the games right now to interact, right? And flexible in terms of the change of form of the user experience. That's actually one of the game's challenge. If you guys probably playing games beside the device, you're really trying to portray the human way how to interact and to play that, right? Touching, seeing, exposing, and probably also leveraging the device itself. In terms of Samsung, right? We are focusing on terms of the mobile, in terms of AI, of the area of voice assistance. Why I can say like that? Because if you're seeing the device, I'm talking about mobiles. This is kind of mobiles, right? If you're seeing the device, the mobile itself, mobile without the internet, it's just a brick, right? It's not connected to everything. It's just a brick. What's the difference with it, with my phones right now? With my 2G phone, it's the same. It's just like voice in data, which is without operator, is dead, right? So how to interact that? Because the interaction is leveraging to the other devices and to the other services and the ecosystem, which is going to robots, virtual realities, other AI service, and autonomous driving, process improvement, healthcare. We do the telehealth project and marketing application. So that's kind of the things that I would like to explain. The marketing application I would like to explain in the later stages. Samsung AI Mobile, basically, we call it Bixby. I also don't ask me why the name is Bixby though, because it came from headquarters and I'm not Korean. Bixby also not Korean names, but I also question my friend that working for Amazon. Why you name it Alexa? I also don't understand why Alexa. Even definitely Siri has a aggregation in terms of what's the name of Siri, speech integrators, blah 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 blah. That's Siri, right? But Google's names of their own names, but maybe we should make it from Indonesia as well. There's other oh, it's one Samsung. That's the things that we're trying Samsung trying to. I'm not trying to sell these kind of things, but the other things I will make it fast. You guys probably who's playing developing games. the other hardware that if you want to integrate with Samsung, definitely Samsung is supporting this kind of 3D in terms of graphics and GPU computation. That's something that related with the graphical itself into the smartphones, into the television, or even to the consoles, right? Well, actually, if you're playing games in Apple phone, in iPhone, the chipset that came from us. So sorry to say, that's basically this is very theoretical. Probably you guys know the Samsung have the two kind of GPU architecture in terms of IMR, intermediate mode renderer in terms of PC and console, which is the processing running into the memory side. But the other things into the mobile and other embedded devices, we call it TBR, tile-based renderer, which is it more faster and lighter. You guys want to learn? Go to open ecosystem. Everything's there, right? Well, in terms of game developers or partners or whatever, something like that, I would like to also to open you guys probably to learn how Samsung learning about the developer ecosystems. We provide in terms of like assistance in terms of API, SDK, interaction, or whatever in terms of technical support. We provide this kind of things. Everything is in the website as well, in the open developer Samsungs. But the other things, since we are R&D in here, if you have further question that regarding this kind of SDK and localized SDK or API that you want to create interacting with your games, please let me know, right? In Srin, in my R&D, we are focusing on the very small part. We're focusing on data intelligence. That's our part in terms of we see the potential of data of user. For example, if you guys using smartphone, I mean, okay, how many people in here that still using conventional alarm clocks? Everybody using smartphones, right? How many times you snooze your alarm? No, how many times? See, average Indonesian 2 times, average Singaporean 4 times. No, that's the fact because I got the data. Actually, when you turn on your phones, everything connected to the internet, in the background process, I'm collecting the data. Thank you very much. Damn, I didn't. But that's the fact. Actually, it's the same thing, just like the devices. Whatever device, you're not buying Samsung, you're using Apple, you're using Vivo, Oppo, or that kind of names, right? Please. But it's something that actually you're using Android or using what? iOS, right? Using Android. You know what's going on with Google's? He's learning about you. You're trying to set that, well, like or dislike, Google can track your location, right? Every 15 minutes or every moving BTS, they ping. It's a background process is running 0.01% of your battery life, unless you turn off your mobile data. That's simple, right? In Srin, we're learning this kind of device data, but also in terms of what we have we have the loyalty platform, blah, blah, blah. But we try to make it a sentiment analysis of why the user like this phone. Whether the people like using Smart View. That kind of things because the phone cannot talk. Well, that's why I'm asking why people keep calling that this is smartphone. Even my mom have Galaxy Note 9 still opening the conventional books to find an address. That's typical, right? It's about how education as well. That's the same thing with the games as well. In the other things, this is our focus as well. One of our research focus actually is on-device AI framework. Why I said that everything's on-device, because what AI actually is talking to the internet or connected. Because Indonesia or any emerging country which is internet is difficult, the devices become dumb. That's the fact. But when the application running offline, the device still become dumb because it's computerized. So we need to have a library or processing that can interact with any kind of neural nets data that learning about the behavior of the profile of the user. How to do that? Absorbing to the device. This is our research. We have actually our organization still is quite small. We have about 150 people of engineer. In terms of patents, we have 6 patents. That research papers published international, we have 2, but we have actually having maybe 11 or 12 papers, but internal Samsung. So we also kind of open to you guys, anybody that who want to collaborate with us, especially doing working for research paper. Honestly, I'm not selling because I'm not marketing. But if you want to do the collaboration kind of research paper or collaboration patent, well, patent is a bit tricky because patent talking about money as well. That's a fact called cost, right? I did this kind of things actually with NTU, with Nanyang. We have the collaboration patent. Only NTU dare to pay 50-50. Indonesia, most of the universities still very, very challenging. And that's my patent. Oh, that's my pay. Oh, I cannot pay. Okay, so NTU dare to do that, but I'm opening because for me, if you don't, if you guys don't dare to pay the cost of the big patent is about legal kind of things, right? Just like Apple and Samsung, who's won? Is the lawyer, right? But that's the things actually, the one that Samsung will absorb. Again, I'm trying to make it these things fast because I would like to have more interactive with you guys. Innovation and competition is driving product improvement, useful usage, and scrutiny. Why I can say it like that? Because if you guys, I saw most of the people in here, some of you perhaps also uh, presenting research paper as well. You're doing kind of something kind of ideation into the project or on the research itself. When you're creating something, you need to see not yourself. You see other things compete the same with you. That will motivate you. That's the same thing, just like playing games. The games of reality, beyond you playing on your device, actually, it came from your own life. I'm not trying to be philosophic, but this is resulting a very diverse needs about the product that you get to yourself. Samsung, we're trying to discover power in some sort of experience, again, because of the devices. But the other things, the challenges. Well, the milestone. AI for games, definitely for me, is totally different. It's many things about opponents, about allies, about avatar, about everything. But AI games is actually is a pattern. It's something that you predefine based on your technology and the device itself. It can see the agents in the software. I can say agent how to sense. Sense meaning that how to predict the movement. Think in terms of the logic, how the processor and speed and the performance act to move itself. In terms of finite states machine, bit more complex because if you guys probably what I mentioned earlier about the player one games, actually it's using many kind of algorithms. One of the things is finite states machine, in to understand how to resolve if there is any bugs. That's also another challenge, right? Again, if you guys want to do develop something to interact with the device, that Samsung currently open in terms of like kind of this kind of games interaction using voice recognition, any kind of health devices challenges, AR of emojis, high speed cameras in terms of using the camera itself, display, we have the infinity display, AI assistant services which is interact with Bixby, foldable device, oops, next year, stylus pen, right? I mean, I think that I'm trying to open more, Hamsamida, but definitely if you have any question or if you don't have any question, I will question yourself. So please, thank you.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. Is there any question from the audience? Question? Yes.
Question, Mas Alfred. What is the interesting findings in terms of behavior during these past 2 years that you found out from your research? I mean, based on like perhaps Indonesian or regional culture. The most interesting finding from your data.
Well, if you talk about the devices, the data that I'm collecting from the devices, Some of it is actually 40% is no 60% is belongs to Google's because oh yeah, come on man, using Android. Android is belongs to Google, right? But 40% is belongs to us. It's called in terms of Android itself. If you know like the kernel, the Alphic virtual machine, right? Every producer vendor have their own proprietary, right? And that kind of things is belong to device manufacturer. If you're learning about the behavior or something like that, of course, in terms of when they provision, when they turn on the device, when the movement of the mobility itself. Of course, telco also have it, but telco cannot disclose unless there is a police instruction, right? But from us, even how we touch in terms of the surfaces, corner, left, down, south or west, whatever something like that, it will be locked. So that kind of things you should using as an experience when you're trying to bring more experience as well. For example, just like I mentioned that I'm collecting a simple data of alarm, how many people snoozing, because actually from there that I can send the notification in the right times. How to wake you up, how many steps that you move. You know what? If I put the limit 3,000 in my steps every day, this stupid watch always said that, oh, it's growing. Tomorrow, 4,000. I keep growing, no, it keep growing. And it keep challenging me. Is that because of smartwatch? No, it's the logic to make you healthy. Like all this, like you're being measured, you being depending on your device. That's also another, probably what Dr. Fu mentioned. Psychologically, you're depending on it. Your behavior, you get used to use it. That's the things actually embed to the device. And we are in the research area, we're trying to learn who are you, who is, I don't know, I mean the device owner. I just know the behavior. Even though that I can do the sentiment analysis, but based on the device owner, the pattern is quite general. I know that, oh, how many people using Oppo camera versus Samsung camera? Samsung camera and Oppo camera is the same. Marketing said it's beautiful using Oppo camera. It's about marketing. Chipset wise, it's the same. So, I mean, again, from the research perspective, we always trying to learn. And what I like to using what I'm trying to answer your question previously with Dr. Fu. We are in Asia should be very proud because we have 262 million people. We need to thinking about localization. We are rich with local. We need to use it. How to use it? In Samsung, we have called TKDN from government. The local ingredient policy. How to do that? Is because of bill of material from the manufacturer? No. Local content, which is people, which is software. Apple trying to do that. Through what? With Binus. Through what? In BSD. In something like that. Alam Sutra, sorry. So I'm happy with that. Because you're teaching other people and probably later on can work with us. So why not, right? So actually, as a research center, my target, beside the technology ecosystem in terms of local, but also talent. I'm opening the door to Binus or to anybody who want actually do the collaboration and actually including the research as well. So that's probably what is my answer.
Right, good. I think we have any more question, or is this the last question?
Everybody hungry?
Everybody hungry. Thank you very much, Robert. Would you please stay in the podium for a while? Right. So, and then also, we would like to again invite Dr. Fung to podium. Yeah, and then
And also we would like to invite Professor Tirtanugraha Mursitama
to give a token appreciation to Dr. Fung, and would like to ask Dr. Yahya to give appreciation to Dr. Alfred. Yeah. Right. So it's a token appreciation from Binus University for Dr. Fung.
And then don't forget to take a picture.
Right. And next is a Dr. Yaya token appreciation to Dr. Alfred. Yeah. Sure. And of course, right.
Photo session.
This is that we are waiting for the photo session for everyone. So we would like also to ask all the committee and also the audience to join us to be in the photo session in the podium before we are going to have lunch.
Have lunch.
Please.
Already
Yeah.
hungry.
I think it's a stomach killing already. Yo, to the ladies. Oh. Yeah. Okay, please everyone, please come forward, then we can have a great photo session. And right. So everyone ready? Get set. Hold on, there is another one. Freestyle. All right, please give round of applause to everyone.
Big applause.
For and then Kim, what's next? And then
I think all of us already hungry.
you're
So
right,
before we
yeah.
begin the next session, which is
All right.
before we begin the parallel session, so we encourage all of you to enjoy the food that will be served at the lobby.
Right. The food is waiting for you at the lobby. But we also remind you to check your belonging and also the schedule. The parallel session will begin after the food, the lunch break. And then please do ask the committee if you don't know where the room for your presentation.
Actually, for the parallel session will be held on the at 1 p.m.
So finally, we wish you have a fruitful academic discussion and great conference. Thank you very much.